Okay, coming up, Alan Steinfeld is joining me to talk about his new book, Making Contact, Preparing for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence, and how the UFO phenomena fits into a greater cosmic and spiritual awareness. We're also going to talk a little bit about his work in remote viewing on this episode of Passion for the Paranormal. Okay, so joining me tonight is Alan Steinfeld, and Alan is an explorer of consciousness, and for over 30 years he has hosted and produced the weekly television series New Realities in New York City. Additionally, he has over 68,000 subscribers to his YouTube channel of the same name, and there have been over 20 million views of people who have seen his programs. These include interviews with luminaries in the field of health, spirituality, and UFOs, and every major UFO researcher in the field. With his media appearances, lectures, and conferences, he informs millions about human potential, remote viewing, and the nature of alien contact. For over 5 years, he has emceed the largest UFO event in the country, Contact in the Desert. His latest book is Making Contact, Preparing for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence, where he presents multiple perspectives on the UFO phenomena to include perspectives from many well-known UFO authors and researchers. Alan, it's a pleasure to have you joining me. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me tonight.
No, it's so good to talk about this subject with people who are open-minded and curious, and we can explore something together. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've had in the book you cover some writings, whether they're essays or writings from some very famous and well-known UFO researchers, Linda Moulton Howe, John Mack, Bud Hopkins.
Well, Bud
There's some
Hopkins,
others in there, Mary
I didn't get
Rodwell.
Bud. I didn't get Bud in this edition, but I
Oh,
did get
okay.
I did get John Mack, who was influenced by Bud Hopkins, but John Mack's the only person who's not with us, who's no longer alive, who wrote an essay. I mean, it was an essay he wrote about 20 years ago that was never published. I talked to his archivist and I said, this essay is perfect for the collection I'm putting together. So it is, you're right. It's a collection of essays by the best and brightest in the field. And these are very intelligent people who are not fooled by, mm, you know, by swamp gas or low flying airplane. I mean, this is real stuff. I'm sure you know, and this is serious business. There's an old book called UFO Serious Business, but this is serious because it is about the future of humanity. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting. We've had those Navy videos released. We had the UAP Task Force report that was put out in June. I'm curious, I always like to I've had a lot of UFO researchers and authors on the show. I always kind of like to get their take on where we are with that. But what was kind of your sense of it? Were you disappointed? Was it what you were expecting? What did you kind of feel about it?
Um, that's always a good question. Initially, I was disappointed because they really didn't say much. They have all these categories, and this is the June 25th, 2021 report from the Senate Intelligence Committee. They said, well, I think they studied like 400 cases or something like that, and they don't come out and say it's alien. They just put it in the class of other. It wasn't space debris. It wasn't, adversarial weapons or a ship. So it's other, which is, not a very convincing sort of, but it didn't deny the fact that there's something out there. So in that sense, it was good. We've moved the ball down the field. We didn't score a touchdown, but we're closer to the goalposts. If you understand football, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I love the game of football.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm kind of wondering what's going to come next. I mean, are you encouraged that we're going to get some more revelations and that maybe down the road here more will be told, or do you think it's kind of more of the same?
No, no, no. We are still we're still on the offense. It's still our ball. The ball is still moving. And the guy at the center of this is someone named Luis Elizondo. You've heard of him, right?
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
he is writing his, I think, a biography or his memoirs, and I mean, this is the guy who knows more probably than anyone. I don't in government, or at least he's willing to admit he knows. So I think with this next level of revelations, um, we're gonna get more substance to put our teeth in. So let's wait till December when Elizondo finishes. This book is supposed to be published. And all along the way, Elizondo is really, as he says, if we can believe a counterintelligence person, he is for disclosure. He really wants the government to come forward. He's the one who broke the whole thing open when he was working for the Pentagon and said, he sort of said, wow, is this stuff real? Are there UFOs here? If there are, how come no one's talking about it? And that got the whole thing rolling. So here we are today, 4 years basically after the New York Times article broke the story on December 16th, 2017, because of Elizondo connecting with Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and then Harry Reid talking about the ATIP program, the advanced there. So Elizondo is the guy to watch, and I'm watching him, and he is moving for. He's we've just passed the ball to Elizondo, and he's running down the field. So yeah, he's on the move.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that, I've had many UFO researchers and authors on the show, and I always kind of like to get and I know you've been in this game for a long time. You've been doing conferences and lectures, and you've been doing that circuit for a long time. Uh, Take us back to how your interest in this field started and what really catapulted you into getting involved in the.
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that, because I actually go into some of this in my book. I have to say, in my essay in my book about how I did get into this, I say I was always interested in science fiction. I always looked to the stars, and I would ask people, isn't this incredible? There are these other worlds out there. I'd say that in probably kind of 7-year-old language. No one cared. No one looked at the stars. Everybody was just so busy working or watching the football game. Nothing wrong with that. But no one was interested in the stuff I was interested. I felt very much like an outsider. And I always wanted to be an astronaut. That was like just something that at 7 years old. And then I read a lot of science fiction. Star Trek was the original series, was happening when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, but late 60s I just started to tune into that there had to be more. And that actually opened up into some spiritual investigations and some mystical experiences I had out of body. So I had all these cues that the world that we were being force fed as middle America, what there was more to it. There's more to this world. And of course, I don't know how old you are. If you remember the Kennedy assassination, do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly was not alive at the time it happened, but I certainly have read about it. I've read books on the subject. I was kind of taken in by the Oliver Stone film he did on the JFK assassination, and
Exactly. Yes, that was a breakthrough film, because and it was breakthrough because he told the truth. He said, "Look, there's the Zapruder film. Kennedy's getting shot by the front." The only reason I mention this is because we haven't been told the whole story about that. We haven't been told the whole story. I don't know if I should mention the vaccine. I'm not like a conspiracy person, but there's more to the virus than we've been told. I think we don't have to go there, but there's more to reality than we've been told. And why is the government covering this up? So when I first heard about UFOs, I didn't think there was, I thought, yeah, I'm open to it. But then I had an experience. So the long story short, I really got into this because I had an encounter. when I was traveling cross country, 1987, July 1987, with a girlfriend. We went to sleep, and in through that night, it felt like we were in suspended animation. We were frozen. I mean, that's all I remember at the time. I didn't remember what happened, or just remember what it was like. Not that we couldn't move, but we just went to sleep and we didn't move. We woke up in the same position we went to bed in, and who even remembers that? And then I discovered I had a mark on the back of my leg. It was this four prong. I can still remember. This is 1987, but it's like, and it was on the back of my knee. Like, who looks at the back? When's the last time you looked at the back of your knee? But someone had pointed it out to me after this trip, and they said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, what is that?" It was a I thought it must be a spider bite or something. But coincidentally or not, in New York at the time, I started to run into some of Bud Hopkins' people. I had met Bud. I asked them about this, and they said, "Oh, yeah, that's an abduction mark." And I said, "Really?" And I didn't remember any of it, but I became obsessed with the subject. I wanted to know what happened to me, what's really going on, why would this happen? So, I have like hundreds of books about this in my library. I go to all the conferences. I knew Bud. He was a great guy. I had interviewed him for my cable show. I knew John Mack. I know Whitley Strieber. I know Linda Moulton. These, because I was so obsessed, I just wouldn't like listen to their lectures. We'd go out to dinner. I talked to them. They became friends. I went to Bud's studio. Had dinner with John Mack a couple of times, and I wanted to know what they knew because these were, and the book is an outgrowth of my obsession with the subject. And what I also discovered, and you might be surprised about this, no one had the whole story. No one has it all figured out. Not anyone I've talked to. There's still a big mystery. Not even Luis Elizondo. He doesn't know what's happening. There's parts that people have here, there, and other places. So I felt the only way to really tell the story is to tell it from many points of view. That's why this book, Making Contact, is a collection of the the essays, which is from the best and brightest in the field. And the idea is if the reader can look at all this, they can form their own picture of what happens because I'm not. So there's pieces that overlap in these stories, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, the idea of telepathy, but it's up to the reader to really respond in their own way and make sense of it because I just put out the pieces of the puzzle, including my own, and I say do with it what you will, make sense of it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so because there are a lot of differing perspectives on the subject, and the more I've delved into it, I've been following for well over 20 years, and it seems like the more you try and peel back the onion, the deeper the rabbit hole goes, in some sense. Uh, I want to, before we get into discussion about the book and kind of where you're going with that in your own experience, was there anything that brought back any memory of what may have happened there? Any regressions, anything like that?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that one too. I have to say, for from 87 to like it must have been like 2017. Is that possible? 40 years? No. That's no, that's 30 years. I didn't want to know what happened. I was interested, the paradox is I was obsessed with the subject, but I hesitated getting regress until I met someone who had seen a UFO, and he said, "This is actually from the Rendlesham Forest." This was Jim Pedersen. I had talked to him at a conference, and he said after he touched this UFO, he couldn't sleep without a sleeping pill. That was in 1980 for 40 years. He's still taking sleeping pills. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I said if he was so shaken up and he didn't want to know, I I want to investigate what happened to me. I think enough time had passed, so I was regressed, and it wasn't as traumatic as I thought. I did see these beings in the back of my van. You see, it's when you I have to say people talk about regression as if they're remembering something. You're not actually remembering an event in a regression because you weren't present there to actually forget it. So it's like the experience is recorded in this other part of the mind. Like people are traumatized, and it is sort of a trauma, I have to say. There's a disassociation, and in the disassociation, the personality memories are not there because you disconnect. So you kind of go. So this is sort of like why I'm saying this, because in the regression, I can't say I remembered it, but I can say that these scenes appeared in my, because I never forgot it. I mean, I never knew it. So I wasn't remembering anything. I mean, maybe on the subconscious level, but I was seeing images in my mind of what probably occurred at that moment. And they were not bad. They weren't negative. They were more curious, and they did take some genetic information. And actually, I have to say, I had a dream about a year later, 1988, where something woke me up in the middle of the night, and they placed this little creature in my hand that looked like well, looked like a deer with big eyes, but I think it was a hybrid of my genetics and their genetics. I know that sounds weird, but that's what I saw. I can't prove it, but yeah, that
So
was
this
that.
was from the initial experience that you had.
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah,
think
did you
so.
have any sense that there were perhaps any follow-up experiences from that 1987 experience?
Yeah, that was another great question. I think there have been. Um, these beings appear to me in dreams. I never had, although I did have a dream where I was floated out. I was floated out of a window. These are dreams because they're not the beings, and I'll talk to you about that in a little bit, but the dream states are how they appear to me. And I was floated out this window, and it was maybe on a ship or something. So there was follow up. And I remember on the ship, I kept putting my hand up to my third eye like this, like in control of my own consciousness. And I sort of got the message that they can't work with me anymore because I was in too much control of my own mind. And that may have been too upsetting for me to be in control of my mind and encounter these beings. So, but I think my theory about why people have these dreams about them, because these are not dreams in the ordinary sense. These are altered states of consciousness, which is where these beings exist. They don't exist in our reality. Like if one was to appear to you right now, Curry, it would shift your point of view. It would shift your consciousness because their mental field is
It's 9
so
o'clock.
different than our ordinary awareness. So in order to meet them in any kind of exchange, any kind of form of making contact, we have to shift our reality. This is my book, Making Contact. So I go into that. I go
Yeah,
into
great.
yes.
I,
So
I wanted to ask, so we've had some cases where people have reported seeing crashes. We've had the 1947 Roswell incident, Socorro, New Mexico. Lonnie's more. I'm just, pointing out a couple of the big ones, the Kecksburg incident in 1965. These seem to be where people have actually, no kidding, seen them in our reality. What's kind of your sense between that and what were
no,
just describing?
that's great. Thank you for asking that. Well, I think in those cases they saw dead bodies of aliens. I think I think so. Maybe they kept. I think something. You have to be very much in command of yourself. So maybe if they captured a live alien at Kecksburg or maybe even Roswell, um, their presence is so strange. You have to have a really strong sense of yourself. And there are people like Whitley Strieber who interacts with them. I wouldn't say daily, but he has a lot of interactions with these beings because he's been able to function in that other sense. So yeah, those crashes and the retrieval of bodies, they only generate this field while they're alive. So there's just something disorienting about being in their presence. And maybe if you're in their presence enough, then you can get used to that. But they play with our minds in a sense where they form a cognitive dissonance in the reality that we're interfacing with. If you look at the ATIP documents, the slides that were smuggled out of the Pentagon, have you seen those? There were about 9 slides.
I saw the 9-page report that was put
Yes.
out on the DNI
Oh, that one. But
page.
there was stuff along with those videos that came out with the Tic Tac and other. There was a couple of documents from ATIP that talked about cognitive disassociations that happen in the presence of UFOs. Like there's a field. So I think I'm only talking about my experience. So I have not seen one. I don't think like appearing in my reality, like boom. But my theory is that it shifts us. It's like you ever hang out with some strange, you ever hang out with like not really crazy people, but you sort of get into their head. You kind of start to see the world that way, or enlightened masters. You kind of get this clarity. Well, consciousness is shared. So when you hang out with these beings, you start to see the world in the distorted way, distorted to us, probably normal to them, but it distorts us. That's that's my theory, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So
But can I ask you one question? How did you started looking at this 20 years ago? Why did you get into this stuff?
that's yeah, that's a good question as well. I think it was maybe a lot of I think one of them was the Philip Corso book that came out in the 90s,
Yeah,
and that was the day after Roswell.
yeah.
I still remember that book, and somebody had told me about that book. Maybe one too many documentaries,
You don't
perhaps.
think something happened to you too, like growing up? I get the
Uh,
sense something did.
No, I don't. Other than a friend of mine, me and a friend of mine were about 12 years old outside, and we both saw something that we're pretty certain was not anything man-made, not anything that we could make any sense of, other than this thing was probably, we saw it for maybe about 10 seconds, and next thing you know, I mean, there was glowing white and red lights, and it was gone. It looked like it just shot out of the atmosphere. I would say that that's really the only experience I've had that I could say was perhaps a UFO. And I was, like I said, I was about 12 years old, and I've never had an experience since. Maybe
You
that,
may have had missing time then, though, if you were regressed back to that moment. I don't know. I'm just
yeah,
guessing.
there was no missing time or anything involved, but both my friend and I saw it, and we both kind of looked at each other and said, wow, what was that? Let's not talk to anybody about this, though, because they're not going to believe us. It was that sort of time. We're talking about the early 80s, and that was a different time back then. I really didn't go out and, tell my parents about it a lot. And, over time, I've told, a few friends and such about that experience. It's really the only experience I ever had. Maybe it was just that one little experience alone that kind of, maybe on even a subconscious level, I just had some interest in the subject. I think my interest kind of started to peak in the 90s, and like I said, I read Philip Corso's book the day after Roswell. There was a documentary film that was out about it as well. That kind of piqued my interest, and then that's my interest kind of continued on from there. Now, I'm a retired Air Force officer. I certainly didn't talk about the subject much within military circles. It was kind of one that I kept quietly to myself, and
Did you see anything while you were in the Air Force? Did you see anything in the sky?
not anything that I could say I couldn't explain.
And
So,
no one talked about seeing anything.
uh, there
No.
were a few times where I had people mention that. Yet I don't. There was a story shared with me from a friend who was actually a ground controller in the Air Force, but I want to get into that story.
That's okay. But you weren't a pilot, or were you a pilot
No,
too?
no, I worked in the intelligence career field, and again, it was really a subject I just didn't broach with most people. But there were a few times where the subject did come up. Sometimes it was kind of lighthearted, and somebody
Because
mentioned, oh,
yeah,
that Roswell thing. These people think, UFOs crashed at Roswell and alien bodies were recovered. So it was kind of one of those things where, maybe even got brought up jokingly from time to
yeah.
time, but really
Because
wasn't a
the Air
subject.
Force was responsible for a lot of disinformation that more than the other branches of the military. It seems like the Air Force was on a campaign to discredit. I'm not saying you, but
Sure.
supposedly. I don't know. That's true.
Yeah, and it sure seems to be the case with Project Blue Book, and
Yeah.
what kind of came out of that, and you know, J. Allen Hynek formed CUFOs after that, and I think he was a little bit taken aback by the Air Force's approach to it, and it seemed like a lot of those cases were quickly dismissed. Now, you mentioned the swamp gas case. That was one of the Project Blue Book cases. So,
Well,
and,
he
and
regretted saying that. Years later, he said he regretted the whole excuse he gave for swamp gas. I mean, so yeah, Hynek's an interesting character, but yeah, sorry. So you were going to ask me something about. I just curious because I'm always curious about why people are so interested in this subject. I'm also curious why everyone's not interested in this subject. This is the most exciting thing to happen to humanity since sliced bread. No, since for a long time. So I don't know why everyone's not interested.
yeah, Alan, I can't agree more. And that was kind of one of the questions on my mind I wanted to ask is,
Yeah.
are you kind of surprised, especially with the Navy videos that came out and now the UAP Task Force, that there's still a lot of apathy out there amongst the
Well,
people?
there's apathy, but there also is a shift in the media itself. So, where the media used to ridicule this, you could see the 60 Minutes program where Elizondo is being talked to by one of the reporters on 60 Minutes and Bill Whitaker. Bill Whitaker says to Elizondo, "So, are these things real?" Elizondo looks at him point blank and says, "Come on, Bill. The government has already admitted this is real." That is confirmation right there from a former government insider saying this is real. The government has admitted it's real. He's not saying real in what sense. What does this mean? But they're not human. They're from someplace else. So the media started to take this seriously. CNN did some reports. Fox, of course, if you watch that. Mainstream, the New York Times, New Yorker Magazine. There were lots. There were probably 1,000 mainstream articles. There's a guy named Steve Bassett who tracks all the stuff and the mainstream that comes out. Have you interviewed Bassett?
Yes, Steve's been on the show twice now.
Yeah. So
Great
he
guy.
in this last, have you interviewed him recently? Last
Yeah,
year?
it was about, I think Steve was on the show with me about 4 or 5 months ago.
Right. So Steve is tracking every single article that comes out in the mainstream, and I think he has about 1,000 of them. He gave me an endorsement for my book, which was nice. Actually, I wanted him in the book because I think he has a really important place in the world. So, but like I said, this is a collection because no one has the whole story. This is why the government, I think, is partly why they're not telling us what's going on because they don't know what's going on. They don't have the truth. They don't have the whole story. because the phenomena itself is in control of the story, you know?
Yeah, Ellen, it's interesting you say that because we've had a lot of other UFO researchers out there that I think some have been feel like the TTSA thing and these Navy videos and Louis Elizondo and that this movement in one sense has been somewhat encouraging. In the other sense, some of these people are saying we've known about this for many years. We know the government knows a lot more than what they're saying here. And if you go back to Roswell, what's been said about Roswell and many other, cases, what say you about these researchers out here that are, really kind of taken aback and saying, they know a lot more than they're leading on to what
Well,
they're
that's
saying?
I totally agree. They know a lot more, but I don't think they have the whole picture, but they know a lot more than they're telling us. And, you know, I think we need Senate hearings. They need to roll out the dead bodies or the live bodies, the craft. We need to have a public discussion in front of the world. This is not just a US phenomena. This is a worldwide phenomenon. I just talked to a Chinese ufologist. People are having sightings all over China. Of course, it's a lot more dangerous to report that because the government likes to keep controlling things. But the US government is sort of in control of this secret, this situation. And uh, I'm not going to go so far as to say it's a crime against humanity, but lying to us about the technological possibilities that this intelligence presents to us and covering it up and not telling us the truth. This is not government of the people, by the people, or for the people. This is government for corporations that don't want to let go of their fossil fuel industry, because if we have free energy, like these ships, whatever they are, wherever they're from, they're not filling up their gas tank to get here, right? We can agree.
Right.
They have a different form of propulsion, and they are doing stuff like accelerating to like what 8,000 miles a second from zero. It's like you just don't get that with Newtonian physics. They're using a different type of physics, so humanity can benefit from that technology. Why aren't they presenting it to us? Because I don't think they want to freak us out. It has to go through. It has to kind of percolate within the consciousness of the people, but it does depend on how much you know the government in this case is like the church when Galileo said, I think there's more out there, and they put him in jail and they didn't want to hear anything about it because it upset their worldview, which said, they said to Galileo, don't use your telescope to look out into space. The telescope was really a spyglass. It was used to look on the enemy. Galileo was the first to point it at the sky. People said, why are you doing that? We know what's up there, and plus God doesn't want you looking in on his bedroom. So don't point your telescope at the sky. Anyway, Galileo did. He became the first scientist. He's discovered stuff that we're still working with. And the church, which was kind of the form of government at the time, denied it all, suppressed it, kept it a secret because they weren't ready for their worldview to shift. We're in the same situation. As the government releases more information, and the other thing is there's more and more sightings. So sightings are on the upsweep. So something is happening. And I think the phenomena is pushing this envelope. And as the government admits more, we will have a shift in worldview. We'll have free energy. Imagine if everyone had access to energy. We could cultivate the deserts. We can have fresh water. There's so much we could do if we had unlimited energy. Um, of course, people are afraid, well, the government doesn't want to reveal this because they'll make weapons out of it. I think if we have free energy, this could create the utopia where we don't need war, where everyone could live in abundance. I'm a utopist. I believe in possibilities. I believe that we can have a peaceful society. I'm like John Lennon, imagine all the people living for today, imagine no countries. We can do this because, I've traveled a lot. It's not people that want war or invading another country. This is government, this is military. The average person, which most of us are, just want to feed their families. They just want to have a decent job in the world. They just want to do good, I think. And its corporate structure, the military industrial complex, as Eisenhower said, that is feeding this competition. People just want to enjoy themselves. So, everywhere, I've been to Russia, I've been to the Middle East, I've been to third world, India. We're all human beings just wanting to have enough food, go on vacation, see the world. Governments create the drama. And I think these beings are waiting for us to take back control over our government. You know, they're not going to do it for us. They're not going to clean up the mess we've made, and corporations, and we've contributed that. Every time you buy a plastic bag and throw it away, and I probably do that, 20 times a week, I feel guilty, but we have to change these things. We have to stop, destroying the planet. They're not going to clean up our planet for us. It's like your mother saying you're not going to have any friends until you clean up your room. We're not going to have any visitors come out in the open until we clean up our room.
Yeah, and I want to get back to the book,
Yeah.
and I'm going to paraphrase here because I know this
Okay.
is not certainly not word for word in the book, but you say something to the effect that you cannot separate the UFO phenomena from a greater spiritual consciousness or awareness. What I think you've kind of already touched on that a little bit. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that take on the UFO phenomena is my unique position, because I think, and this is just my theory, these beings, most of them, and there's many types of ETs out there, but most of them have reached a place of peace in themselves, and they're here to wake us up to who we really are. That's another reason they're not just appearing in the White House alone. We have to stretch into the potential of our divinity, if we want to call it that, our collective consciousness. When you meet someone and you lock eyes with them, you relate to them as an aspect of you. There's a meeting. Our consciousness meets each other. So the spiritual awakening is what we're making contact with. We're making contact with this higher version of ourselves. These beings are not here to invade our world. They're not here to control our lives. They're here to wake us up to who we really are. And who we really are is infinite, in our potential, in our consciousness. I mean, I do believe in reincarnation. I believe that people have had near-death experiences and come out of their body. I've had astral. I've been out of my body. So we're we have a body, we have a mind, but we're greater than all that. We are infinite consciousness. So when we realize that, we will meet these beings on an even playing field.
And Alan, are you surprised? Now, you've obviously studied the work of John Mack and Bud Hopkins and maybe even Dr. David Jacobs, who takes
Yeah,
kind of a different point of view on the abduction phenomena. Do
right.
you find it interesting that people have different takeaways from people who have been abducted? Some have taken away negative experiences from it. Some have taken away positive experiences. Are you kind of do you what do you
Well,
make of that? That there's so
well,
much.
that's a good question too, but I'll quote the Kabbalah. We don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So if you're sort of a fearful person, you're going to listen to the stories that create that fear, like David Jacobs. Or if you're kind of a person who's made peace with himself, like John Mack, for instance, he's not hearing a lot of the fearful stories. So, I mean, he may have, but he's also taking these people to a new level where he's saying this was an evolution of consciousness for them. So, you ask someone, we go to see a movie, you ask someone what that movie's about, you ask a group of people, they'll say 10 different things. Oh, the movie's about this, this. I mean, there might be some agreement. People see the reality that whatever it is, not just UFOs, the reality of where they're at, and that's true for everything. So David Jacobs, I don't know, I like him. I've met him a bunch of times. He's a nice guy, but he's projecting his own fear. John Mack said these people were evolving. Bud Hopkins was sort of in the middle of John and David. So Whitley Strieber's changed his mind. At first it was fearful, and then he went deeper, and he's like, in a way, this has been his life, and he's made an effort to make sense of this. So I don't think it's unusual because it happens all the time. I could ask someone about you, someone will say good things, bad things, or me, someone will say this, that. Everyone has their own idea.
Yeah, like we had just touched on a little while ago, you cover writings from a lot of UFO researchers. You mentioned Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, Dr. John Mack, Nick Pope, Grant Cameron, Mary Rodwell, all these people who have different viewpoints and have studied the phenomena for many years. Of these great researchers, is there one out there that really had the most influence on you and really kind of helped shape your viewpoint on the subject and where you are today?
Well, I did read a lot of John Mack. He shaped my ideas on the subject as understanding worldviews and like why we can't have this same conversation, Curry, with a lot of people on the street because they've just shut down. So, but Grant Cameron, after I've written this book, and he was also an influence in writing it. He says, it might not be ETs that are out there that people are seeing. We're just calling them ETs because that's what we think we know. This phenomena actually might be something way beyond what we're calling ET. Jacques Vallée also um, says that kind of stuff. So Grant's been a big influence. He says, do you think, he says this in the chapter book, do you really think UFOs need lights on them to find their way across the universe? Do you really, says, those lights are for us. Those lights are so we will notice them. The whole idea, he says, about the UFO phenomena is to wake up to this idea that there's more to reality. This is Grant says that. I don't agree with all of that, but a lot of it makes sense. He says, when you've seen a UFO, you were meant to see it. You at 12 years old was meant to see that, Curry, and you never forgot it. For whatever reason, you are entangled in the phenomena. This is Grant's thing, and I think that's true. I think we shift when we realize there's something bigger, and these beings, wherever they are, whoever they are, it wakes us up to a bigger part of ourselves, and that's the spiritual reality. So Grant, I think, very smart guy. He helped me see that there's no chance. This is not for. There's no innocent bystanders here. You are entangled just by just by having this conversation. You're entangled. Just by listening to this conversation, you're part of the phenomena. Tell that to your listeners, okay?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on it. And I know I've heard Dr. Stephen Greer say, there's many possibilities here, just like you kind of already alluded to. Um, that they are traveling vast distances, but how they're doing it, of course, is beyond our known laws of physics. Perhaps there's an interdimensional aspect to this. Maybe some of this is even in that category of angels, or what somebody may categorize as angels, or what's kind of your senses? Do you think that's a possibility, that this is multifaceted, and maybe some of these that we are seeing are traveling vast distances from
I
other
don't
stars?
rule out anything. I think they are traveling through wormhole technologies. No one's traveling, I mean, at the speed of light. I think there are warp speed. I think there are ways of bending time and space. I mean, Einstein said this: if you have enough energy, which creates a huge gravitational field, you can bend time and space. This was what his light experiments with the eclipses, the light coming around the sun was bent by its gravitational field during an eclipse. So that was Einstein, I think it was 1906, that proved his general theory of relativity. And so we can bend time, space through a huge gravitational field. So they are doing this, but there are interdimensional beings. I think that's what I was also alluding to earlier. When you're in the presence of these interdimensional beings, it makes us more interdimensional, a sense of that. And unless we're lucid enough, we go unconscious in the presence of interdimensional beings. And angels, I think angels are a whole other category of being. I don't necessarily think they're associated with this phenomena. Like, what I mean is, this dimension, 3D reality, is the simplest of all. It's like one station, but there's all these other dials on the radio, the other frequencies. We have the capacity with our minds to tune into them, but 3D is the only one we've been programmed to see. So people have seen angels, people have seen ghosts, people have seen ETs. There are levels and levels of dimensional phenomena, and of ET realities. And there's some vibrating at 3D, 4D, 5D. There are different densities of beings. A part of us is higher dimensional. So it's a lot more complex than just visitors from another planet. I have to admit that. Yes.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit before we started recording here, and I told you that I delve into pretty much all aspects of the unexplained on this show, whether it be the paranormal and hauntings, or cryptozoology, the Mandela effect, and then this UFO phenomena is another one I cover quite a bit. I'm always interested in how this stuff may be interrelated, and I think, and it sounds like you are in a sense too. How
Well,
this
yeah,
stuff
they
is
are
all.
all the same thing. They're all vibrational realities. Paranormal, well, there's a lot of paranormal activity around UFOs, but it's because the world is paranormal or normal, or supernormal, or supernatural. The world is supernatural. I mean, we only see a small slice of reality, and we think anything outside of that is paranormal or unusual. But if we were to really see the world as it is, we'd see the multifaceted aspects of this reality right here. I would see your auric field. I would see the beings of your family standing around you. There's people who do that. That's not paranormal. That is normal. We've been educated out of the true capacities we have. You know, I think William Blake said we have senses that are far exceed our normal senses. We all have this capacity to see and feel other realities. We're coming into this time where we know we're energy, where we know we don't end at the borders of our skin. We extend into space. You could send people energy. You could send them healing energy. We can have telepathic communications. So my mission is to resolve the paranormal, the occult, the supernatural, the cryptozoology. I mean, I'm sure there are Bigfoots running around. They've achieved interdimensionality. My theory of Bigfoot, and no one seems to agree with me, is that they are the Neanderthals that developed because they had bigger brains and they developed the capacity to be interdimensional. Does that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, I think so. And I've had Ron Moorhead on the show, and he wrote the Quantum Bigfoot. It was one of his latest books, and he's been, you know, of course, been a Bigfoot researcher for many, 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 many years. And I think that's kind of where he's at this point on the kind of the Bigfoot subject, is that there seems to be some sort of perhaps interdimensional or some sort of, if you want to say, supernatural element to this. uh, even going back to the Native Americans, they kind of believed that these Bigfoot creatures had kind of maybe a supernatural component to them.
Well, how come we've never found a single body from a Bigfoot? We've never found a fossil remain. We've never found anything because they have the capacity to dip in and out of reality. They can do that. And we're just suspecting that. So, but what do you think about the idea that they may have been Neanderthals that developed a larger brain capacity that were able to slip in and out of time? Do you think there's something to that?
Perhaps, I'm not going to claim to be a somebody who's real knowledgeable on the subject. I certainly have covered it from time to time on the show. My I guess you could say the verdict's still out for me on the subject. I keep an open mind about it. There's been a lot of just over the last probably 2 to 3 years, and I've talked about it on the show with a few other guests. There's been a lot of sightings here in Utah, northern Utah. We've had a lot of sightings, and that's another interesting topic because there's some people that are kind of expanding their view of what may be going on here, where there's others that are more of the opinion that Bigfoot is just a flesh and blood creature that perhaps has evolved to be able to kind of evade us
No,
uh,
well,
doesn't
they
exist.
have evolved to evade us, but they have, I mean, their sense of smell, they could smell a human being a mile away, and they know we're dangerous for them because we just want to capture them and examine them, and they don't want to have anything to do with us. I do also think there might be related to the inner earth beings, about the hollow earth theory, and that there's the city of Telos under Mount Shasta. I just talked to a guy who said he was inside in that city of Telos. I'm going to be interviewing him. So the world is full of a lot more mystery. And if we just say, like, oh, there are no UFO, there's no ETs, there's no Bigfoot, we lose this mystery of who we are. I do think there are. I don't have any Bigfoot experiences, but it makes sense that you know they've eluded us because we're very barbaric. They may be full of hair and they may look barbaric, perhaps, but they're a lot kinder and gentler than us. I mean, dolphins are much more intelligent than humans. Dolphins and whales. That's we don't have to look far to be in touch with a higher intelligence. Dolphin brains are much more developed. So the mystery is everywhere if we look for it. But yes, the paranormal is normal when we become normal human beings, not brainwashed, conditioned.
Yeah, now you've also delved into remote viewing, and I think you've taught some classes on that.
I
This is
do.
always one that I've tried to wrap my head around, but maybe if you could help for listeners, what is remote viewing, and maybe how you think it may relate to the UFO UAP phenomena.
Yeah, I do think it's related. First of all, I think that consciousness, this, whatever is making you think, whatever is making you, your person, or me, or anyone listening, making us alive is this thought reality, this thought. Our minds are making us, but our minds are not a function of the brain. They're received by the brain. It's like a radio, you open up the radio, you're not going to expect to see like the band or the announcer in there. The radio is a receiver of a signal. Our minds are, our brains are receiving a signal of our consciousness capacity, but it's not localized here. It's it's bigger. So this is just the receiver. It's a sender and receiver. And who we really are exists outside the framework of that. So I compare it to a computer. Your computer's like your brain. It's the hardware. The software are the programs of the personality. That's all in here. But it doesn't work. You can have hardware and software, but the computer just sits there until you have an operator. The operator is consciousness. Without consciousness in your body, that eternal aspect of your being, there's no one home. I've seen, I just lost a girlfriend who, I looked at her body. There was no one there, but all that essence and vitality goes somewhere. It's energy is not just created or destroyed. It just exists. So I think we are non-local, and when we realize that our right brain is accessing the field, it's like the internet. The right brain can access stuff outside the computer. It's like if somebody didn't know you had an internet, you said, I'm getting information that's not on my computer, they would think you're crazy, because we also, our right brain, as opposed to the left brain, which is just the stuff on programmed into your computer, the right brain accesses the infinite field. It really does. So when I teach remote viewing, I tell people the prerequisite is get out of linear thinking, get out of your identity, get out of the concretized level of understanding reality. Re, get out of this mechanistic way, and when you get out of that mechanistic way, if you've ever meditated, you start to get into this sense of oneness, this feeling, whether it's real or imagined, it doesn't matter. When you can drop into that field, you open this window, and I say to you, okay, my friend is at a certain location, tune into him, and immediately you get a picture in your mind of where that person is. We can all do that because we're all made of non-local intelligence, really. Who you are, Curry, is not in the body. The body is in that. We are the consciousness is not contained in us. We are contained in consciousness, is what Deepak Chopra says. So yes. Does that explain it a
Interesting.
little bit? So
Yeah, I think so.
the
And I
ETs,
think it.
oh, I just want to say the ETs are aware of that. So what was it going to say? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know. There's a lot of researchers out there. Some of the UFO researchers out there, if I can speak right, are more your nuts and bolts kind of researchers. They want hard, fast data. Um, do you think some of these researchers out here, and I'm not going to name any names, I'm not about doing that, but just in general, that some of these researchers out here are kind of missing the bigger picture of
Well,
the.
I organized the book actually going from the nuts and bolts to what we just talked about, consciousness. So it's sort of an arc. I start with people like Nick Pope. He's not interested in consciousness. He said, "Oh, very interesting." He's a nuts and bolts guy. He worked for the government. He knows why governments don't disclose. So I start with the external. So, and then I move into the researchers who look at the phenomena from outside the phenomena, and then I go to the people who've had experiences, the abductees, Whitley Strieber, and then I go to people who are very at peace with the phenomena. So, I don't. I think if you just look at the nuts and bolts, you have to ask yourself, who are these beings and why are they here? I answer that by saying they're here because we've been a disturbance to the field of consciousness. If you have a little splinter in your finger, it's going to upset your whole body. We are the splinter in the universe. Universe means unified harmony, the one verse. So consciousness is this harmony. If something's disturbing, like you can tell if you walk into a room and someone's had an argument, it's in the field. Lynn McTaggart wrote a book called The Field. It's in the field. So we are part of the field. So we've disturbed the local galactic field, and they're here to make sure we don't blow ourselves up, but also to kind of help us through this birthing of this higher consciousness. So it is all to do with consciousness. You know, the most popular pastime for humanity for the past 5,000 years has been war. This is what we do all the time, make war. And I think we're ready to grow up. You know, we're ready, and this is why it's related to a spiritual awareness. We need to realize that we're here to make peace with reality and go to another level of who we are as human beings. So, yeah, if you're just looking at the hardware, you're going to miss the depth of the phenomena that people are seeming to have. But you have to start there. So that's why I start with Nick Pope, because you have to start at that level and then proceed from the outer to the inner.
Yeah, it certainly seems that when we entered the atomic age, they certainly became more interested in us and what we were doing. So.
Well, because we ripped a hole in time space, and that's very upsetting to the local galactic family. You can't just rip a hole through time space and expect to get away with it. That's what atomic blasts do.
Yeah, it certainly does make you wonder if that's really made them take much greater notice in us and what we're doing. Well,
Well, I think
Alan,
definitely. They said it's like, uh-oh, the teenagers have the car keys. We better check up on them. So, and they have appeared over nuclear missiles. There's lots of cases where UFOs have appeared over nuclear missile silos, turning on and off the nuclear codes here and in the Soviet Union when there was a Soviet Union. So, you know, if we could just make peace with ourselves, making contact is an inside job. It's dropping into the infinite infinitude that we are and calling in that same infinity. If we ever walk, I'm sure you can in Utah, you walk out into the night sky and you just see infinity out there. And you know, a part of you knows you're not separate from that. That is home. At least I feel that way. So is this planet. But where the universe is not out there, the universe is here, and we're all part of the greater cosmos. We're all part of everything. I mean, it just feels that way to me. Does it feel that way to you? Or you
yeah,
still out?
absolutely, and I think I've been involved in the paranormal and doing that, but I think that's also doing this show has kind of expanded my my views on that. Just kind of like what you're talking about, how we fit into this greater cosmic awareness and this kind of greater cosmic picture. Absolutely, and I think you know just what my work in the paranormal alone and doing this show has really kind of opened my mind to all of that.
Right. You know that ghosts are real, that astral project. I mean, I've seen I carried a ghost out of a haunted house because it was disturbing me. So there's many things that the mainstream just doesn't want to talk about because they can't explain it. They can't explain it by the science, but we have to keep talking about it because reality is much larger than the one they want us to believe. And that's why I wrote this book. I should send you a PDF of the book or something, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd really appreciate that,
Okay.
Alan. And let's. I'm going to pull up. I'm going to share the screen here.
Thanks.
We'll pull up. We'll pull up a image of the book. There it is.
Oh, great. Thanks for
Preparing
doing
for the
that.
new realities of extraterrestrial existence and making contact. So
You can
where
get it
can
on
people?
Amazon, go into your local bookstore, ask for it, order it, and I think you'll get a bigger perspective. Preparing it means that, by taking all this information in, if you have knowledge, you're prepared for the event. This book gives multiple perspectives. So I think it's important to get it from many points of view because there's so many people interested in this and taking it seriously for once now that the government and the media has come out with this. So thank you. Thank you for interviewing me, Curry.
No, thank you, Alan. I really appreciate it. It's been an intriguing discussion, and hope people will listening will check out the book. Again, where do they find it? I know you said Amazon. Where else can they find the book?
Barnes and Noble. It's a St. Martin's Press. So St. Martin's Essential is the publisher. You can look for it online. Just type in "Making Contact" by Alan Steinfeld, and you'll get it. If anyone has questions about what they heard tonight, email me at newrealities@earthlink.net. You can also check out my YouTube channel, New Realities, on YouTube, youtube.com/newrealities. So, yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for spending the time with me, Alan, and thank you for the work you're doing. And I really appreciate you joining me. And have a great what's left of the rest of your night. I know you're out there on East Coast.
Put your email in the chat, and then I'll send you a PDF. Okay.
All right, sounds great, Alan. Thanks again, and have a great night.
Thanks, Curry. Bye.